This is the first of several videos I'm doing on inner city train travel in the US. I'm a big fan of trains and a big fan of architecture, so this first video combines two of my main loves into one, a video about great looking train stations across the country. I like most train stations I've ever met, even if they've only made half an effort to be attractive. But I really like and respect the train stations where they really made the effort to impress and tried to make a statement of civic pride. And I get wistful whenever I see an attractive train station where the trains don't stop anymore. I always want them to come back to life. And I want there to be more trains stopping at stations and more passengers taking them. Where I live in New Jersey, most of the stations in the New Jersey Transit 150 station plus system are attractive, and I've filmed all except one, plus others where the trains don't stop anymore. So there are plenty of videos in my channel covering all of these, as well as certain ones in Pennsylvania, New York, and Connecticut. What this video does is takes you around the country to look at what I feel are the nicest looking stations in the lower 48 states. And as I say this, I'll start showing you ones in my top 10 and my top 50. When I start talking about my top 10, if you're counting, there's a few more than 10. I have too many favorites. Also in this video, I'll talk about a few surprisingly not very attractive stations. And I'll also show two beautiful stations in impoverished cities where it's just a shame that they are sorely in need of restoration and preservation. I've already posted a 10-minute version of this video. If you don't want to sit through a half-hour video, more or less, we'll see how this goes, and just want to see the pictures of what I'm talking about in less time. There are more than 500 stations that Amtrak currently stops at in 46 states. So if you don't see a station that made my top 10 that's in your top 10, fair enough. Chances are I'd love your picks too. I've looked at pictures of all the 500 plus stations and personally been to many. I just had to draw the line somewhere, and I'll be showing more stations in upcoming videos. Two of the stations in my top 3 which I wonder if people who've never been to them know about. I'm especially blown away by all 3 stations in my top 3. Other videos are coming along shortly that talk about which states are the best and which ones are the worst for inner city train travel, and I will go into what some states that are lagging should do to step it up. But let's get this series started with a look at the best in American train stations. Thanks for watching. At first, I'd like to highlight some of the architects whose names you'll see when I'm talking about some of the stations in my top 10. So this is star pack listing of architects that designed most of the stations that are in my top 10. Daniel Burnham, who came from upstate New York and practiced in Chicago. He shows up on a couple of the stations. John Parkinson was from England, and he moved to LA and designed many significant buildings in LA, including the LA Coliseum and Los Angeles City Hall, and his son joined him in his practice there. Charles Sumner Frost was from Maine originally, moved to Chicago for the work, and that's where his practice was. Thomas Rodd, his practice was in Pittsburgh. On the right, Henry Van Brunt and Frank Howe, they started their practice in Boston and then moved to Kansas City. They were following the work. So that's a running theme of the architects, is that most of them will move from where they grew up to places further west in pursuit of work. But Kenneth Mackenzie Murchison was the exception. He was born in Brooklyn and he stayed in New York, practiced in New York. Jarvis Hunt, though, was from Vermont, and his uncle was Richard Morris Hunt, a famous architect, and Jarvis moved to Chicago and practiced from there. Alfred T. Feldheimer was born in Chicago, grew up in Chicago, went to the University of Illinois, my alma mater, and then he went to St. Paul to work for Reed and Stem and then he practiced with different partners over his career, and he eventually moved to New York. Ernest Graham was from Michigan and moved to Chicago. So you see that Chicago plays a big role in a lot of the architectural practices, but it was a transportation center and an architectural center. So let's start off with number 10 on my list, which is the Indianapolis Union Station. This was designed by Thomas Rodd from Pittsburgh. And the style, I'll mention the styles. A lot of times the styles are unique and separate from other styles, and sometimes there's a lot of overlap, but this style of architecture is described as Richardsonian Romanesque, and it's called Richardsonian because H. Richardson was the architect who started designing things in the Romanesque style, which is my particular favorite style. So I call this a night owl station because trains currently only arrive during the middle of the night. The westbound train that comes through Indianapolis only comes through 3 days a week. So this station is very lightly used, unfortunately. But the westbound train arrives at 5:15 in the morning and it leaves at 6 a.m. And then the eastbound train arrives at 11:49 at night and it doesn't depart until 12:15 a.m. So during most of the day, this station is silent and quiet, and the trains only go through 3 westbound and 3 eastbound per week. But people have taken fantastic photographs. It's a very photogenic station. And I think it's right near the big indoor arena. So in the future, it could be used by people taking the train to the arena, but I doubt very many people do if it's going to leave so early in the morning and arrive so late at night. And in the interior, this is the passenger waiting area. It doesn't look anything exciting. Sometimes that's what has happened, that the waiting areas in these grand stations have been reduced to kind of a small utilitarian area. I'll show that in other stations. But other times the main waiting room is intact and being used, and it's as grand on the inside as it is on the outside. But this station, also look at it, how grand it is on the inside. So a lot of the train stations I've noticed, if they're not being used as train stations or either at all or that much, they're used for other functions, including weddings. So beautiful. The next station is Los Angeles Union Station. Never been to this station, but I've seen pictures of it so many times. And it was designed by Parkinson and Parkinson, father and son team. John Parkinson was born in England. His son Donald, I don't know whether his son Donald was born in the United States, but this is in the Mission Revival and Art Deco and Streamline Moderne style, combination of styles. And just the seating looks like Streamline Moderne to me, but beautiful station on the inside. And it's still fairly well used. I think it's the most well-used station in the western U.S. The next station is in St. Paul, Minnesota, Union Station. A lot of the stations are called Union Station because back in the day, they would be named after the individual railroad that built them, but then when more than one railroad would come and use the station, then they would call it Union Station. So this was designed by Charles Sumner Frost. It was opened in 1923. Charles Frost also designed Navy Pier and the old Chicago and Northwestern Station in Chicago, which was just beautiful. It's tragic that it was demolished. And this is in the neoclassical style. And looks very nice on the inside. The trains do stop at the station twice a day, one going westbound, one going eastbound between Chicago and Seattle. And this is the train looking outside the station. And you can see to the right of the Amtrak train, there are what appear to be other tracks that were there that are now, they have grass growing. So these stations all were much more heavily used back in the day. And a lot of times they're reduced just to a single platform or maybe 2 platforms. The next station was designed by Daniel Burnham. It was opened in 1925. It's Union Station in Chicago, which is completely owned by Amtrak. A lot of the stations in the U.S. are not owned by Amtrak, but this is one of them that is. Another one is Philadelphia. And Daniel Burnham is famous for designing a lot of famous buildings. He was the overall planner of the 1893 Chicago World's Fair, the Columbian Exposition. He designed the Flatiron Building in Manhattan. He designed Pittsburgh Union Station, which I'm going to show later on, as well as Washington, D.C. Union Station, which I'll also show. And this is in the Beaux-Arts style. Now, Daniel Burnham died in 1912. He actually died a year before construction started on the station, so he was heavily involved in the design, but he never lived to see the station built. And this station took 12 years to build. It was the longest of all the stations. I think some of the things going on when World War I happened during the construction, so construction stopped, and I think they had some labor issues. But you think things sometimes take a long time these days, but this station took 12 years. And this is the interior main waiting room with a beautiful skylit ceiling. Fantastic. This station is also heavily used by the commuter lines in Chicago, so it's a very heavily used station. I think it's the fourth busiest train station in the country, with the other three being on the East Coast. And then this is also a very busy station. I think it's about as busy as Chicago, the Philadelphia 30th Street Station. And this was designed by a firm that was made up of partners that used to work for Daniel Burnham, and then when Daniel Burnham died, they had their own firm. So Ernest Graham, who I showed before, was the lead architect of this firm. This station was opened in 1933, and Ernest Graham and his firm was also famous for designing many famous buildings in Chicago, including the Wrigley Building. And this station is in the neoclassical style. And it's a fantastic looking station, inside and the outside. There's a shot on the inside. And it's, as I mentioned, it's still very heavily used. So all these gates actually go down to tracks of where trains actually stop. So there's another Union Station, the one in Denver. And this was opened in 1914, but it was earlier versions of it were open before that. So it's a station where they continually were adding and replacing and amending the station. So it's got a lot of going on. It's got Beaux-Arts, classical revival, and Romanesque revival. And it was designed by Gove and Walsh, who were from Denver. And as I was mentioning, they keep doing new things. So this is a much more modern canopy that they've recently built over the tracks. So it's really fantastic to look at. They're keeping the station up to date. They just don't want to stop tinkering with the station. So this is during the construction, and it's done now. So it's another exciting thing going on in Denver. So while we're in the Colorado area, I just wanted to show another where the trains used to go from Denver. They went up to Wyoming and then back over east. And this is a station in Cheyenne, Wyoming, which I just think is fantastic. And I once took a 2-day train trip from the San Francisco Bay Area to Chicago. And at the time, the trains went to Denver and then they went up to Wyoming. So I'm pretty sure we stopped in Cheyenne, but I don't recall the station. I know that they gave us an hour. They said you could get off the train and walk around the downtown if you wanted to. So I made friends on the train, and 3-4 of us ran around the downtown and then back to the train station to catch our train going further east. Anyway, this was opened in 1887, designed by Van Brunt and Howe, the two partners who were from Boston that moved their practice to Kansas City, and they also designed the Portland Union Station, which I'll show coming up. And they also designed a significant building on the Harvard University campus, Memorial Hall, which looks like a cathedral. And so this style is described both as Romanesque revival and Richardsonian Romanesque, and I'm not sure what the fine line is that differentiates those two types of Romanesque, but to me, it's just a great looking station. There's some talk about it being returned to Amtrak service, and I hope that's the case because it's a shame that such a station would not be continuously used. So, this is the next station designed by Van Brunt and Howe, also in the Romanesque revival style, opened in 1896, the Portland Union Station. And I've always admired it. I've been through this station, but I didn't get off the train. I once took a train from Seattle down to San Francisco, Bay Area. So we went through this station, but I just really like the tower and the fact that it has that sign, "Go by Train," really encouraging people to ride the train. And it's fairly well used. And it looks good from every angle. There's a lot of pictures of this station, and these are just a couple that I picked. And the interior looks fantastic. So the next station up the way from Portland is the Seattle King Street Station, and I like the name of this station. And it was opened in 1906, designed by Reed and Stem from St. Paul. And I believe that Alfred T. Fellheimer was involved in the design of this, as he was in some of the other stations that I will show coming up. He was one of the designers of Grand Central in New York and Detroit's Michigan Central Station and Cincinnati Union Station. And so this King Street Station in Seattle they didn't really give a description of what the style is, but they say it's modeled after the Campanile in the Piazza San Marco in Venice, which I believe fell down and had to be rebuilt. Maybe they had an earthquake in Venice. So I call this style Venetian Revival. I don't know if that's an official style, but that's what I call it. And it, too, has a great-looking waiting room. And in Seattle, there's still another right across the street, because the railroads back in the day, they each built their own separate stations rather than combine them. But this is a great looking station. This is Union Station, but it's no longer used as a station, but it's the offices of Sound Transit, which is the transit agency in the Seattle metropolitan area. It's the former Oregon and Washington Station. And it's in the Beaux-Arts style, opened in 1911, designed by Daniel Patterson. And what an interior. And I read that this is also used for weddings, and you can see why. Great lighting. So Seattle really has a rich railroad station heritage. And this is one of my personal favorites. I've been to the station several times, taking the train down from New York to Baltimore. It's Penn Station, and it was opened in 1911, designed by Kenneth Murchison. And he also designed Hoboken Terminal and two great-looking stations I'll show in a minute that are no longer operating as train stations, but they're still standing and they're beautiful. So I would describe Penn Station in Baltimore as a jewel box station. It's not as big, but it's just packed with architectural detail. It's beautiful. And that's the same for the next station that Kenneth Murchison designed. He was from New York. He was one who grew up in New York and stayed in New York. And also designed the Hoboken Terminal, which I show in some other videos of New Jersey and train stations and commuting across the river. You can take a ferry from Hoboken Terminal across to New York. And at one point it had intercity train service. Now it's just commuter service within New Jersey. Maybe in the future there might be trains, interstate trains that'll be operating out of Hoboken. It's a beautiful station with a beautiful waiting room. And these are the other two stations, Scranton, Pennsylvania, and Jacksonville, Florida, that are no longer operating as train stations. Scranton is a hotel. I've been there. When I saw the station, I go, wow, it is so visually striking. It's like something you'd see out of Italy. And Jacksonville, I haven't ever seen the station. I haven't ever been to Jacksonville, but what a station. It looks fantastic. So if Jacksonville feels like rerouting their trains, the trains still stop in Jacksonville. It'd be great if they could use this station again. And Scranton, they're talking about rebuilding a rail line from New York to Scranton. And New Jersey Transit is actually building one short leg of that route that may someday go to Scranton. New Jersey Transit is building a line to Andover, New Jersey, which is on the way to Scranton. So maybe someday train service will return to Scranton. So I have many stations in my honorable mention category, and the first one is this one, beautiful jewel box of a station in Salem, Oregon. Opened in 1918, designed by J.H. Christie. And it's got everything, neoclassical, Queen Anne, and Beaux-Arts. And it's used by Amtrak, as is this station in Southern California, San Bernardino Santa Fe Depot. I've looked at pictures of this station and I just thought, wow, what a station. And I've watched other videos where a lot is talked about how San Bernardino has really gone down, isn't what it used to be, but this station is still there. Opened in 1918, still used by Amtrak, designed by W.A. Moore. Mission Revival, Moorish Revival, Spanish Colonial Revival. A lot of revival going on here. And it too is another station that looks good from every angle. It's just really unique, that Moorish tower design. And the interior, very nice. This is one picture I'm including of a picture from what it looked like back in the day, but you can see that the station hasn't changed. Maybe there's more trains that used to stop here, but still it's held its own. Santa Fe Depot in San Bernardino. I mentioned before Richardsonian Romanesque. Well, this was the station in New London, Connecticut, still used, heavily used by Amtrak. It's on the Northeast Corridor. What a great location right by the water. And it was designed by H.H. Richardson. So you can't get more Richardsonian Romanesque than having a station designed by who it's named after. And I think this is the only train station he designed. And it may have been built after he died, but what a great looking station. I've been through this New London several times. I've never gone around the station, but it just looks great. And I think it's an Acela train that's stopping here at New London, coming around the curve. So you never know where you'll find some really excellent looking stations. This is in Utica, New York, Union Station. Not close to a major city, although Utica's decent sized in upstate New York. So this is the first station I'm showing where you'll see the name Fellheimer in the name, designer, opened in 1913, Italianate style. And wow, look at all that marble on the inside. So that'd be worth a visit. And this station stuck out to me in Worcester, Mass, Union Station, Beaux-Arts, opened in 1911 by Watson and Huckle. And it too has skylights. Fantastic. And then I'm going to show two stations in Michigan, both designed by Spear and Roans. This is in Niles, Michigan, right on the Indiana border. Richardsonian Romanesque for sure, with the arches, and just a fantastic powerhouse of a station. Niles, Michigan, opened in 1892. And this is no longer used as a train station, but this is in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and in the downtown area, opened in 1886. And compared to what Amtrak uses now for a station in Ann Arbor, this is 1,000 times better. I'll show the station that they use now in another video. And this is a classic smaller station. Also gets a ton of trains that stop at it in Hudson, New York, which is north of Poughkeepsie on the Hudson River, between Poughkeepsie and Albany. And it's got that Hudson River roof design. A lot of buildings and houses in the Hudson River Valley have that kind of design on the roof. It's just a fantastic look. And this was opened in 1874, so it's the oldest station I'm showing. And when you get back into the 1870s, they usually don't have records of who the architect was. So I just know that it was opened in 1874. beautiful station. And you can read about this station, all the stations. Amtrak has a great website. I think it's really well done. It's called Great American Stations, and it will have a picture of the station and talk about the history. It also usually talks about the town that the station is in. It's really a great resource if you really want to get excited about going to visit places. I think Amtrak does a great job, and I would definitely check that out. It also will go list who owns a station, and there's usually 4 parts of a station, and sometimes they're owned by different parties. A lot of times they're owned all by the same party, either Amtrak or private or combination, or sometimes state governments or the cities that they're in own them. But they'll talk about who owns this building, who owns the platforms, who owns the track, and who owns the grounds and the parking lots or facilities. So it's a great resource. Check that out. So here's another station, very eye-catching, with the name Fellheimer and the designer's name. This is when Alfred Fellheimer partnered with Wagner, and this is in Greensboro, North Carolina, opened in 1927, the Beaux-Arts style. And here's the interior there. It looks very nice. So I'm not just enamored with stations that were built in the late 1800s, early 1900s. I like modern new stations too, and Raleigh has done a fantastic job. This is designed by the firm called Clearscapes and opened in 2018. And there's nothing old-fashioned or traditional about this, but it's just a great look. And some of these pictures come from the Clearscapes website, and they're justifiably proud of what they've designed here in Raleigh. Just an exciting station. And look at this interior. This huge copper-colored wall. Just really a great look. You have pictures from various angles, and it almost looks like a really nice airport. I mean, most airports don't look this nice. So Raleigh, great job in Raleigh. And just to show, this is the building that they used. It was an old warehouse. This is what they used to transform into the train station. So what a great job Raleigh did. There's so many great things you hear about Raleigh. This is one of them. So this is another modern station in Niagara Falls, New York. Very nice. I don't know what it replaced, but it's a nice station designed by Wendell Engineers Architects. I think they're from Buffalo. And here's a picture from their website, looking very nice at night. So this is going to be a hodgepodge of what I call stations in the special category. So Richmond, this is a fantastic looking station. Opened in 1901, designed by a firm from Philadelphia, Wilson, Harris, and Richards. Second Renaissance Revival and Beaux-Arts. So this is a great looking station, but I just got to show you the next picture. It shows that they built a highway, major elevated highway right next to it. I mean, it's a shame that, you know, they did avoid the station just barely, but, you know, sometimes I think cities and states have gotten carried away with highways plowing through the downtowns. So anyway, here's another station that is equally nice, terrific looking station, only this is no longer used as the train station. But this is Union Station in St. Louis. Fantastic looking. Opened in 1894, designed by Theodore Karl Link, who was born in Germany and moved to the U.S. And he also designed the Pittsburgh Wabash Terminal, which I'll show a little later on, along with Edward Cameron in the Romanesque style. And St. Louis does have a station, sort of a transit center next to this that the Amtrak trains stop at, but they don't use this as a station. I think it's now a hotel. but just beautiful. And in Pittsburgh, another beautiful station, that this whole building was the station. It's no longer used as the station. It's now a condominium complex called the Pennsylvanian. And I featured it in another video just about Pittsburgh's train stations. And this was designed by Daniel Burnham in the Beaux-Arts style. So if you want to see more of me walking around this station, there's another video on my channel. And I go into how this is a beautiful station, and in my video there was a wedding going on under this rotunda. It was just fantastic for people to have driven up under back in the day. And the interior has a fantastic area that's used for weddings also. This is what passengers are relegated to. It's on one little corner of the station, and they have a parking garage, Amtrak parking garage, that's not very well used. Well, another thing about Pittsburgh station is trains only stop either real early in the morning or really late at night or during the middle of the night. So it's another station where, again, during the day, not much is happening. So this garage is not used maybe a lot during the day. One time when I shot the video, I don't think there were any cars parked in this garage. But maybe less cheery. This was another beautiful station in Pittsburgh that was designed by Theodore Carl Link, who designed the St. Louis station. And this was such a tall station. It's no longer standing. It was demolished in the 50s, but I talk about it also in the Pittsburgh Trains video. But what a powerhouse of a station. 1904 it opened, the Beaux-Arts style. And this was an interesting station, Little Rock, and it's another station where the trains don't stop during the day. The trains only stop during the middle of the night, but it's a significant looking station. I've driven past it when I was in Little Rock, and it's very attractive from the outside. Opened in 1921, E.M. Tucker, Renaissance Revival. It was designed and built in 1 year because they had a fire at a previous station, and a lot of things burned down, but the clock tower is from the earlier station, so it dates back to 1908. And the architect for this also designed Texarkana, which I'll show in a little bit. And here's the interior of the station. And again, you'd have to be here in the middle of the night to appreciate it. I don't even know if they open it during the day, but that's the only time trains stop in Little Rock. And that's also the case here for Fargo, North Dakota, another station in the Richardsonian Romanesque style, opened in 1906, designed by Samuel Bartlett from St. Paul. So that's why it sort of made this special category list, because it's only open during the night. And I put this station in here just to show you how low some places can go with their stations. This is what is currently the station in Omaha, the city of Warren Buffett, where he's donated a lot of money to a lot of beautiful fountains and public amenities in Omaha. And he owns a railroad. He owns the Burlington Northern Railroad, but this is the station that's currently used, and I describe it as being in the Dollar General prequel style of architecture. This is opened in 1983. For whatever reason, back in the 70s and 80s, I think there was like an anti-city movement, and train stations were either demolished or moved out of, and these would pop up around. This is sort of what the station in Ann Arbor looks like that I didn't want to show in this video, but I'll show in another video. But it's a standard style, if you can call it that, designed by some guy. So just to give you context, that's what a Dollar General store looks like that you see everywhere now. So it's sort of the same non-style. As is the case when you have cities that have stations that are not very attractive. Somewhere in those cities there are more attractive stations that are no longer used, and that is the case in Omaha. Unfortunately, both these former stations still stand. So the one on the left is Union Station. It's used as a museum. Fantastic interior. And the one on the right is the Burlington Station. I don't know what they use that for, but the tracks still go by it. I think it's one of these is right next to the station I just showed, the Dollar General station. So I wish they would move back into either one of these and use them as a train station. And then here's another one of those Dollar General stations that was in Schenectady. Unfortunately, it was demolished. Really happy to report they got rid of this thing. This is the new station they've built in a traditional style, much, much more attractive in Schenectady. Opened in 2018. Also designed by Wendell Engineers Architects of Buffalo, who designed the Niagara Falls station that I showed earlier. And then there's another one in the unique category. This is the Houston Amtrak station. I can't believe it. When I first saw this, I go, it must be a mistake. It's like a little square boxy station, highways flying up overhead and everything. And this is the fourth biggest city in the U.S., and this is the train station for Houston. And I'll also make a little hay about this because you hear a lot of talk about there being a new, as Texas being one of the prime candidates for a high-speed rail line that would go between Dallas and Houston. And it's the optimal distance for high-speed rail, where it would be faster than planes or driving, which is the distance of 250 miles. And so you hear all that talk, but this is the reality today. This is the Amtrak station that's used in Houston. And I'll show you another building that still stands in Houston, a former Union Station, designed by Warren and Wetmore, which was another firm that was involved with the design of Grand Central in New York, opened in 1913. And this station has been incorporated into their baseball stadium in Houston. And this is the main entrance. You walk through this station to get into the baseball stadium. So here's Minute Maid Park, which is a very busy station. Whenever I've watched part of a game that's being played here, it's such a unique stadium. And they will show this stadium fairly often on TV because the Houston Astros are a very good team. They continuously have been winning the World Series lately. And you have to look at a lot of different pictures. Where is the station? Well, here it is way out in the left field corner. And I guess that's where people come in if they're coming in from the downtown area. And here's a closer up shot. So they have a roof deck so people can stand up there and watch the game from way up high. And just to show you how busy the station is, there's train tracks, simulated train tracks that run along the left field outfield wall. Whenever I think a Houston Astro hits a home run, that a train, smaller scale train runs along those tracks. And to show you how commercialized everything is, they even have advertising for Chick-fil-A on the foul pole. I've never seen that. Maybe that's more common now in Major League Sports, but I've never seen that level of advertising. Anyway, that's one station that still exists in Houston. And this is a former station, an Art Deco type station that was in Houston that only lasted for 25 years, designed by Wyatt C. Hedrick. So I'll show you one more station in Texas, and it's a shocker. This is the Texarkana station, opened in 1930 in the Renaissance style, designed by E.M. Tucker, who also designed Little Rock. And in 1978, this was put on the National Register of Historic Places. So it was only took 48 years from when it was opened to be put on a register of historic places. That's something. I don't know if that's a record, but it is still being used incredibly, not the main part of the building. Passengers have to walk around to the side, and they have a platform out back. It's very sad looking, very sorry state of affairs. So Texarkana, I've seen videos of people walking around downtown Texarkana, and it's just almost like the zombie apocalypse, and it's just a shame what's happened with Texarkana. They had great architecture, including this station. So I don't know what it's going to take to revitalize Texarkana, right on the Texas-Arkansas border, but boy, it'd be great if this station would be restored and brought back to fuller life, as would be the case with the whole downtown. And so, like, as Texarkana is to the south, Gary, Indiana is to the north, and Amtrak doesn't even stop in Gary anymore. They stop nearby, but they don't stop in Gary. And this is what the station looks like now, with no windows, totally gutted. But it was opened in 1910 in the neoclassical style, and the tracks were up above. And you can sort of see in the picture on the right that you can sort of see there's a fence, and I think there's still tracks. I don't know if they're operating, but they're still up above to the left. And it's a shame. I mean, this is representative of Gary in general, but beautiful station. It's too bad that it's in an impoverished city that has a lot of problems, but it'd be great if it could be restored. So let me get to my top finally, as this video is now 45 minutes long. There's one of my top threes is in Kansas City, Union Station. I've been to this station. It's beautiful on the inside, just really fantastic looking station. Opened in 1914, designed in the Beaux-Arts style by Jarvis Hunt from Chicago, who also designed the Union Station in Dallas that is still in operation. And look at these interiors, just fantastic. Now, most of the gates here, trains are no longer coming through on the tracks that these gates would lead to, but there is still service to Kansas City, and it's during the day. It's not during the middle of the night, at least. So, and it has restaurants in it, and it's just a beautiful station. Kansas City should be so proud of their station. And of course, Washington, D.C.'s Union Station has to be in my top three. It's just a beautiful, beautiful station. I've been through this station many times when I've gone to Washington, D.C. for work, and it's the kind of station where when you go to it, you don't feel like rushing through it. You want to just stay. And there have a lot of restaurants inside. I've heard half of them are now closed. Half of the retail restaurants in the station are closed. Got hit hard by the pandemic and just the general decline in retail, but it's just a beautiful station in the design in the classical Beaux-Arts style by none other than Daniel Burnham. Opened in 1907 and looks fantastic on the inside, just so well done. And then this shows you its proximity to the Capitol. So when I would take the train down to Washington, D.C. from New York, I could walk from the train to wherever I was going. I happened to be going to one of the federal agencies to meet with them. And so it's just a beautiful station and a great location. So that's Union Station in Washington, D.C. Beautiful. And then this is my number one station. It's in Cincinnati, Union Terminal. It's just an Art Deco powerhouse. Opened in 1933, designed by Fellheimer and Wagner. And I believe the city of Cincinnati owns the station. And the one time I visited it, it had been used as a station, then they moved out and no longer had the train stop here. They had kind of like one of those Dollar General stations that they were having people use, and then this was being used kind of as a retail mall, but it was just so big of a building that whatever they could think of to put in there for retail just was dwarfed by the station. And now they've moved back and are using this again as a station. Not too much, which I'll mention. but beautiful. Look at the interior, just unbelievable. I remember when my friends who lived in Cincinnati, they wanted to show me the station, and I might have been into train stations back then in the day, but it was just so interesting to walk around in here and see this level of architecture. And I thought, wow, why can't this be a regular train station? Why not have it be back in operation? Well, now it is, but the trains only stop here again in the middle of the night, and it's not even close. It's like in the 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. time frame, and it's just three trains going west. The same train that goes to Indianapolis stops here at an even worse hour in Cincinnati between Washington, D.C. and Chicago, and it runs just 3 times a week westbound and 3 times a week eastbound. So whatever's going on in this station has to be other than the actual train travel, because it's very lightly used. And it's too bad. It's something I'm going to talk about in an upcoming video about what Ohio could do to help utilize its infrastructure better, including having more trains come to Cincinnati. And I'll talk about that in a later video. And this is just a beautiful Art Deco clock on the outside. People do come here to visit, and I think they're looking out on the tracks going, yeah, how come can this more trains stop here in Cincinnati? So it's kind of a viewing area. This is kind of one small corner of the station that's used for the actual waiting area in the middle of the night at Union Terminal. So yeah, it's not what it used to be back in the day, but beautiful station overall. My number one. You might be wondering, why isn't Grand Central Terminal on my list? Well, it used to be used by Amtrak up until like the 1980s, maybe 90s, but it's no longer used by Amtrak, and it's used by Metro North very heavily. It's used by Metro North to go to trains to go to upstate New York and the suburban area of New York and Connecticut, all the way to New Haven. But that's it. So trains used to go all the way to Chicago from here, but they all now leave from Penn Station in New York, which I'll show in another video when I talk about the state of New York stations. So a lot of the stations I've showed you are very grand. I'm just going to show you one last station that's on the small side, and it just caught my eye and it just reached out to me, and it's in the middle of nowhere. It's in Prince, West Virginia, which was named after someone with the last name Prince. And Prince, Virginia only has a population of 116 people. Yet they also have a train station on the same line that goes to Cincinnati and Indianapolis. So you can take a train from Washington, D.C. to here, and it actually arrives during the daylight hours. So you don't have to arrive here during the middle of the night. And I found it interesting. This was opened in 1946, so it's one of the most modern stations I've shown here, but the architectural style is streamlined, art moderne, and it was designed by the firm of Garfield, Harris, Robinson, and Schaefer from Cleveland. And Garfield was Abram Garfield, who was the youngest son of President James Garfield. So it's something I think also that the child of a president became an architect. You don't hear that too often. So, and this just shows you from Google Maps how remote of a location it is. I couldn't even find the town. I don't know if there is a downtown Prince. It's sort of near the town of Beaver, West Virginia, but I don't know if Beaver might be a little bigger, but I don't know if they have their own little downtown. But so it's all by its lonesome. If you got off here, I don't know where you'd stay. If you could walk to a place to stay, I don't know. Be worth checking out. Here's the interior of the Prince station. And I just like the lettering you can see through the windows. And it's almost like from a time capsule from the 1940s. And then this is just a great looking canopy with the rounded corner on the edge, and an Amtrak train bringing the station to life. I don't have the ridership figures for Prince, but I'm sure they're not very much, but they get trains that stop here 6 times a week, 3 going westbound and 3 going eastbound. And if you want to find it, here's the map of West Virginia and all their train stations. And here's way down at the southern part of the state, the poorer part of the state. But West Virginia actually has a fair amount of train stations for a state its size, and it'll make my list in a future upcoming video of states that have good Amtrak service. So that's it for all my stations. I've almost reached an hour. Sorry I was talking so long, but like I mentioned, there is the short version if you just wanted to look at the pictures of the stations. But I feel like train stations are really important. I think train service is really important. So thanks for watching. Something I loved putting together, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.